Hello students, here is the recap of the video of the lesson we had on fever 103 degrees Fahrenheit by Sylvia Plath. So get ready to annotate, take notes, stop the video whenever you want to and you have a thought or an insight that you'd like to add to your notes. So the title and the connotations of fever 103 degrees are several. First of all, we have the fact that fever is something that results from an illness. So it also can, because of the temperature that the brain is put through, it can lead to hallucinations and a sort of heightened state. And so this is about an actual experience that Sylvia Plath went through. And we have some letters that Sylvia typed to some friends describing her situation in March 1962 when she's in Devon and still living with Ted Hughes and the two small children. And from this letter we get a real sense of her loneliness, and she's addressing her friends Paul and Clarissa, asking them to visit. And she talks about how, well, this is the all too brief heaven of our moving in last fall to halcyon weather and our own apple harvest. And she said it was neutralized by this awful winter. And so she goes on to describe how she was so cold and how it was difficult to heat the house, and there were fleas everywhere, and she has chilblains, and it's hard work, this bucolic, so-called bucolic life. And she's trying hard to see the bright side. She speaks of the daffodils brightly beginning to show, and the sparrows on the thatch of the roof, and their communal spirit. And so she's trying hard to see the positive side of everything here. And so in the next letter that Plath writes on the 11th of July 1962, she describes a summer drought in which she and Hughes lift the lolling heads of their otherworldly plants and beg them to hang on. So again, an image of kind of thirst and desperate, trying to survive. And then on the 19th of October in the autumn of 62, Plath startles Clarissa with news about the breakdown of her marriage to Hughes and her own poor health. She says, "I am at present totally without access to friend or relative, and have been stupidly ill, lost a lot of weight, and am running a flickery 103 degrees fever, getting up each morning at 4 a.m. to write. My one quiet time." And she says my one quiet time because, of course, she's alone with her two small children who need a lot of attention, and Nicholas is only a small baby, and she's living at this point in a flat in London. She's left Devon, and she's in a poor state, both economically and in terms of her physical health, having succumbed to a flu-like illness. And so the next morning after writing the letter, she wrote the first draft of the poem, Fever 103 Degrees, in the dark. And she told Clarissa as if she was writing in a train tunnel or God's intestine. And she composed 6 drafts of this poem in that one night. And they're all preserved at Smith College in America, where she studied. And they're all dated the 20th of October 1962. Fever 103 degrees. Pure? What does it mean? The tongues of hell are dull, dull as the triple tongues of dull, fat Cerberus who wheezes at the gate, incapable. So here in the first 2 tercets we have the opposition already set out for us, that it's going to be the tension in the poem, the tension between purity and corruption. And this idea of hell that is used in the first half of the poem, really the first part, a hell which is spilling out into the world that the speaker is in. and she paints this picture of a very incompetent guardian of the gates of hell, this triple-headed dog, Cerberus from Greek mythology, who is wheezing and incapable of licking clean the aggy tendon. So this aggy tendon, aggy is a sort of flu, if you like, and so even the dog has the flu. This Cerberus, this mythological dog, who's meant to be invincible, and to make sure that the boundaries are kept clear between hell and this world. But he's unable to do that. And we have a lot of triplings and repetitions of doublings, if you like, in this poem. And here we have the sin and the sin, and later on love, love. So there's a sort of spilling over going on here. And this spilling over is carried on in these two stanzas with the image of smoke. The tinder cries, the indelible smell of a snuffed candle. Love, love, the low smokes roll from me like Isadora's scarves. And so we have this image of the candle, which reminds us again of Macbeth. And when he says in Act 5, out, out, brief candle, when he learns of the death of his wife, Lady Macbeth, we're given an image from Shakespeare that is alluded to here of the brevity of life, and the indelible smell nonetheless tells us that we are left with grief, with something that we cannot erase, this memory. So the tinder, of course, is something that sparks the fire, but here we have an antithesis of the spark and the tears in the tinder cry. So there's lots of tension and opposition here. Isadora Duncan is alluded to. She's the beautiful dancer who did the dance of the 7 veils, these scarves, a very sensual dance. And the speaker of the poem now identifies with this Isadora. She says, the low smokes roll from me like Isadora's scarves. I'm in a fright one scarf would catch and anchor in the wheel. So there's a kind of amalgam between the smokes of hell and the scarves of Isadora, and these smokes that are threatening, or these scarves that are threatening to kill the speaker. Isadora Duncan famously, tragically died when one of her scarves or veils caught in the wheel of her car, and she was strangled. Such yellow sullen smokes make their own element. They will not rise, but trundle round the globe, choking the aged and the meek, the weak. So notice that we have now an image of being kept low. They will not rise, these smokes that stay low, and they cover the earth, they trundle round the globe. And these smokes of hell attack the weakest, the aged and the meek. And this word meek means gentle and mild, and again it could be an allusion to the Bible where Jesus said, and the meek shall inherit the earth. So again it's a religious image there. The weak hothouse baby in its crib, the ghastly orchid hanging its hanging garden in the air, devilish leopard. Radiation turned it white and killed it in an hour. So here the image of a vulnerable and weak creature is carried on. Well, we have the idea of the baby and the orchid, but these things are corrupted. The baby is in a hothouse, almost like a plant. Well, this could be a reference to Nicholas, who is in his crib while Sylvia Plath is writing this poem feverishly. Perhaps the temperature that she has in her own body is sort of expanded out to the whole room to encompass her child. Some people have also read this as being a reference to herself as a hothouse baby, the idea of being coached by her mother to overperform, to overachieve. I don't know how much I believe that interpretation. The orchid, we know that she had orchids in her flat in London, But this is also a ghastly orchid, and it could be that she's hallucinating here with her fever, which, her temperature is causing her to be delirious. She's making an association with the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which were created to beautify a desert. So that's interesting, maybe her orchids here trying to beautify her rather desolate flat in London. But here it turns ghastly. She also calls it a devilish leopard. This could be a reference to the spots on the petals of the orchid, and I've chosen a picture here that shows such an orchid. But the leopard reminds us perhaps of Dante's Inferno, and in the Divine Comedy we come across such a leopard. Again, a bit like Cerberus, a creature from hell. So these images of hell now turn into contemporary allusions to the recent atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, when she refers to radiation turning the orchid white and killing it in an hour. This death of the flower is also then a death of any attempt to try to beautify her life, perhaps. Greasing the bodies of adulterers like Hiroshima ash and eating in the sin, the sin. Notice here we have the word adulterers, which could also be a reference to the Divine Comedy by Dante, in which he shows us the circles of hell and the different sins as they are punished. And there is a different circle for each sin. So here we are with the adulterers. And this could be a reference to Ted Hughes's adultery, of course, in his affair with Assia Weevil that she has now discovered as she writes this poem. And the reference to Hiroshima once again. Ash is also an image of grief, because ash is often thrown onto the heads of the mourners. And the repetition again of sin, this biblical idea of turning your back on God, and the punishment for sin in the Catholic religion of her parents was through hell. And then there's a direct address. Darling, all night I have been flickering, off, on. The sheets grow heavy as a lecher's kiss. Is this word darling addressed to Ted Hughes, her lover, possibly her husband? And this flickering off and on and off and on reminds us of this candle that is going out. It could also remind us of an electric light bulb that is failing because she actually lost. She was that poor that she had a meter, an electricity meter in her apartment, in her flat, and she would run out of money to put money in the meter, and that would make the electricity flicker. And she says the sheets grow heavy as a lecher's kiss. Well, a lecher is someone who is very lustful, and someone like a Harvey Weinstein, perhaps. And so these sheets are wet with sweat from her fever, but this sweat is likened to the disgusting kiss of a lecher, and perhaps she's thinking of the betrayal of Ted Hughes and how disgusted she feels by that. 3 days, 3 nights, lemon water, chicken water, water make me wretch. Notice the echoing rhyme between lecher and wretch, and this feeling of disgust. But we also have a turning point at this moment in the poem with the reference, the biblical allusion to 3 days and 3 nights, which could refer to the resurrection of Jesus, who spent 3 days in the tomb after the crucifixion before being resurrected. And this idea then of transcending death, transcending suffering, is being introduced at this point in the poem. And I am too pure for you or anyone. Your body hurts me as the world hurts God. I am a lantern. We have a transformation taking place here, a sort of purification, and the reference to lemon water and chicken water and water, all to do with healing perhaps, but also the tripling of water, this idea of baptism, purification, cleansing, a washing of sin. And when she says your body hurts me as the world hurts God, it's the body of Ted Hughes perhaps that is like a sin that hurts God. She says, I am a lantern, and my head a moon of Japanese paper, my gold-beaten skin infinitely delicate and infinitely expensive. So this image of the Japanese paper lantern rising in the sky, again an image of rising, as opposed to the low imagery of hell at the start of the poem. Here we're rising above and transcending the image of the lantern, but the gold-beaten skin, so she's actually transforming herself into this lantern. It reminds us also of Lady Lazarus and this idea of resurrection that we found in that poem. Does not my heat astound you, and my light, all by myself? I am a huge camellia, glowing and coming and going, flush on flush. Now this heat and light and the glowing and the redness of the flush could of course be all a reference to the fever and this temperature that comes and goes as it does when you're ill, but it's also quite a sensual image of the camellia, the flower, perhaps representing female sensuality as well. I think I am going up, I think I may rise, the beads of hot metal fly, and I, love, I am a pure acetylene virgin, attended by roses. So once again with the anaphora, I think I am, I think I may. This is this beginning of a change. And beads of hot metal could be the sweat beads, and this metal gives us this tangible feeling of stinging. And the acetylene virgin, this is a gas, so this image of being transformed from water into gas is again a transformation of state. And the Virgin, a Catholic reference there, the Virgin rising into heaven, attended by roses. Roses, again, an image of female sensuality. By kisses, by cherubim, by whatever these pink things mean. Not you, nor him, not him, nor him. Myself dissolving, old whore petticoats, to paradise. So she's now associating herself with the figure of the Virgin Mary surrounded by cherubim. And whatever these pink things mean, is that a sort of strange allusion to femininity? I don't know. But then this tripling of the word him, is that referring to the men in her life, her father, her husband, leaving those behind, and herself dissolving, a bit like again in Lady Lazarus, and she's dissolving to paradise, leaving behind all the layers of female stereotyping that is represented through the old whore petticoats. So these 18 stanzas, a very long poem, which in the form describes the journey, the hero's journey perhaps of the mythological Anglo-Saxon or Norse sagas. The speaker identifies with the image of the ascending virgin, the suffering mother, and it's a structure going from hell to heaven through the suffering of hallucinatory experiences. So the themes could be suffering for art, this idea of mysticism, transcendence through suffering, adultery and sin as being part of the suffering from which we escape into a pure state. So the imagery used of purity, fire, hell, heaven, the exotic plants and lanterns and religious imagery and all the words to do with rising are the motifs that characterize this poem. And the tone is one of a feverish, hallucinatory transcendence. And in this context, this delirium described reminds us perhaps of the experimentation with hallucinogenic and psychedelic drugs, the dissolving of the self in order to discover a new state, a loss of identity, a questioning of what is feminine, and religion subverted.
Fever 103. Pure, what does it mean? The tongues of hell are dull, dull as the triple tongues of dull fat Cerberus who wheezes at the gate, incapable of licking clean the aguey tendon, the sin, the sin. O Otto da Fe, the purple men, gold-crusted, thick with spleen, sit with their hooks and crooks and stoke the light. The tinder cries, the indelible smell of a snuffed candle. Love, love, the low smokes roll from me like Isidora's scarves. I'm in a fright one scarf will catch an anchor in the wheel. Such yellow sullen smokes make their own element. They will not rise, but trundle round the globe, choking the aged and the meek, the weak hothouse baby in its crib, the ghastly orchid hanging its hanging garden in the air. Devilish leopard, radiation turned it white and killed it in an hour, greasing the bodies of adulterers like Hiroshima ash and eating in the sin, the sin. Darling, all night I have been flickering, off, on. The sheets grow heavy as a lecher's kiss. 3 days, 3 nights. Lemon water, chicken water, water make me wretch. I am too pure for you or anyone. Your body hurts me as the world hurts God. I am a lantern. My head a moon of Japanese paper, my gold-beaten skin infinitely delicate and infinitely expensive. Does not my heat astound you, and my light? All by myself I am a huge camellia, glowing and coming and going, flush on flush. I think I am going up, I think I may rise. The beads of hot metal fly, and I, love, I am a pure acetylene virgin, attended by roses, by kisses, by cherubim, by whatever these pink things mean. Not you, nor him, nor him, nor him. Myselves dissolving, old whore petticoats, to paradise.